Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, a book which was a finalist for the National Book Award, an accolade which I do not begrudge it in the slightest. So, prior to the publication of this book, Anthony Doerr was most famous for his novel All the Light We Cannot See, a book which I read and greatly enjoyed, although I didn't quite understand why it was as acclaimed as it was, although I certainly thought it was a good book and I really did enjoy it. But I'd heard such good things about Cloud Cuckoo Land that it was so sprawling and it had such a grand scope and was so ambitious that I just had to pick it up and see what it was about. And oh boy, am I glad that I did, because this is a crackerjack book. So, what is Cloud Cuckoo Land about? Well, as I just said, it is a sprawling work which covers hundreds of years from medieval Constantinople all the way to the future in the 22nd century. However, all of its threads are held together by a common motif, and that would be a fictitious in book text by an actual real world author, an obscure ancient Greek writer named Antonius Diogenes. This fictitious book is the titular Cloud Cuckoo Land, the story of a simple shepherd man longing to fly like an eagle to a city in the clouds, which is basically a utopia. Um, and this book is discovered and translated and read by different characters throughout the course of this expansive story. So chronologically, the story it concerns five principal characters, but chronologically, the first two characters are Anna, a young Christian girl who lives in Constantinople just as it is about to fall to the Ottomans, I guess, and Omir, who is a young Muslim boy who is on the opposite end of things in that conflict. And Anna is the one who initially discovers the text of Cloud Cuckoo Land and who smuggles it out of Constantinople just as it falls to the Muslims. And she meets up with Omir and they end up traveling together. And then in the 1950s into the early 2020s, we have the story of Zeno Ninus, a closeted gay man who struggles with his own sexuality and his attraction to a fellow soldier along whom he is being held prisoner alongside of in Korea, and kind of his kind of seeming failure of a life, but which ultimately finds purpose at the end in the translation of Cloud Cuckoo Land, which was discovered by Anna in the Constantinople section. And concurrently to Zeno in the present day storyline, there is the story of Seymour Stuhlman, I believe, who is a young autistic man who becomes something of an eco-terrorist who is very concerned with the environment and global warming and all the things that are happening to the planet, and who eventually becomes radicalized and resorts to radical means of trying to wake people up and save the planet. And their storyline intersects in, I believe it's 2020, and then in the distant future storyline in the 22nd century, we have the story of a young girl named Constance who is supposedly on a spaceship traveling to a distant habitable planet to continue the human race because the Earth got wrecked due to the global warming and environmental catastrophes that Seymour is so concerned about in the present day storyline. And again, all these threads are held together by the motif of Cloud Cuckoo Land. But what this book is about thematically is an ode to books. This is a reader's book because this book, it's about literature. This book was written with a very evident appreciation and love for literature, and that is palpable on practically every page. And there's just such a great appreciation of literature and fiction in this, and how important those things are, because this book is also very hopeful. There is such a recurring theme of hope throughout this book, even though things occasionally do get pretty dark, that things always have the ability to get better, and how fiction and literature helps remind us of that and helps us realize that sometimes. And so the text of Cloud Cuckoo Land comes to just mean a great deal to a great many characters over the course of the story. There's also a great deal of discussion of environmentalism and the things that we're doing to our planet, and the degradation of the planet due to man-made effects and whatnot. There's a great degree of that in there as well. But what this book is also about is not only an ode to books, but an ode to fools, because there is recurrent discussion in this book about the nobility of fools, because fools don't know when to quit, and they are the kind of people who believe in causes which most other people would say are lost, but who persevere because they just, like I said, don't know when to quit. And it really is just so hopeful and optimistic. Again, even though this book does go to some dark places and things often get rather dour, there's always this feeling that things can get better, and that books can help remind us of that, and that books are, it kind of foolish things, really. That you don't eat them, you don't drink them, you don't live in them, at least not physically, but they're so important nonetheless. And even though many people may consider literature to be foolhardy, that it's all the more noble and admirable because of that. And it weaves these themes together so seamlessly, and it just comes off so well. And this is an impeccably plotted book, by the way. This is kind of a rebuttal, it could be seen as, to Stephen King, because I read in November of 2022, I read Stephen King's book on writing, in which he advises people not to plot stories because you just don't need to plot stories. This I would hold as a direct rebuttal to that, because this book is impeccably plotted. Things are revealed and teased out at the perfect rate, but the characters are also very lifelike and well-rounded. And they are very distinct, especially the character of Seymour in this book. That character was really good. What Anthony Doerr did with that character was really masterful, because initially he is a villain. He is kind of a villainous character, but the way that you come to understand him over the course of the story, the way that you come to see through his eyes, and kind of you definitely do understand what he's doing. It was really well done, and all the characters really just popped. They really were very human, pretty well rounded, at least. Now, the writing in this book is also really good. Anthony Doerr's prose, his word choice is pretty standard, but he's able to craft some really artful metaphors in this and liken some things to some other things in a way that's really striking. So this book is very well written as well. And speaking of likening things to other things, I think that this book could perhaps best be likened to David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas, ironically a book that also has the word cloud in its title, because both of those books are about sprawling narratives that encompass hundreds of years, and all are connected by a motif of a story that features in each of the subplots which comprise the work. This book is very much like that, but it's very, very well done, and again, impeccably plotted, and it just comes off so well. Now, as for criticisms of the book, in the early parts of the book, in the early pages, it's a little hasty, I thought, because Anthony Doerr he hits the ground running in this book. Like, it goes from 0 to 100 like that, because he has to set these characters up kind of on the fly to really get the story going. So there's a lot of information that's crammed into very little page space, and it can kind of feel rushed a little bit, but only in the early sections. Like, it's just kind of a hectic pace early on, but in maybe the first 50 to 75 pages. But after that, it irons it out pretty smoothly, and it's very well paced for the rest of its duration. But it can feel a little frantic in its early stages, but it does wear off. And The writing again is just really good. The characters pop. It's just a great book overall. There were some things towards the end that I wasn't really a fan of so much, but that's just personal preference. There were some plot developments that happened towards the end, but I was just kind of like, I wouldn't have. I didn't care too much for some things that happened towards the end of the book, but that's just again personal preference. That's not an objective criticism. But this book is just a great book. It is, and I could definitely recommend this book as a book to read if you are kind of in a reading slump, if you have fallen out of the habit of reading, if you have lost the spark, so to speak. Pick Cloud Cuckoo Land up because it is a kind of readership affirming book. It really does just kind of exude a warmth, an inviting quality that can kind of again reaffirm your faith in the ability of books to really move and impact you. And it's just a really great book. So to rate Cloud Cuckoo Land, I am going to give Cloud Cuckoo Land an A, not quite an A plus because there were just some small things that I would have done differently. Again, the pacing is a little quick in the early sections. Um, and towards the end, some things happened that I just didn't personally care for. But overall, it is a remarkable book, and I can definitely recommend it. So, Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. Have you read Cloud Cuckoo Land? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, what your reaction to it was, and whether you have agreed or disagreed with any of my commentary about it here today. And if you have not read Cloud Cuckoo Land, like I said, give it a look, especially if you need a book that's going to get you back into reading or can show you what books can do, because this is one of those books. It is a reader's book, and it is written with a palpable sense of appreciation for literature, and it really is just something of a little marvel of a book. And by the way, this book, despite being 574 pages, I believe it's a lengthy book. I read it in less than a week because it goes fast. Like the chapters are like James Patterson micro chapters of just like a page or two, or maybe 3 or 4 pages at most. You can cover some pages in this book pretty fast. Like you can get some pages read in a pretty short amount of time with this book, and so it really does fly by, and it won't take you nearly as much time to read as a book of its size might lead you to believe. But yeah, Cloud Cuckoo Land, great book. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.